Welcome to the Simple Switch podcast, where you'll join me, Rachel, the founder of Simple Switch, to talk about conscious consumerism and positive impact purchasing. Spending our money in a way that helps our planet and the people on it can be complicated and frustrating, and we're passionate about bringing ease to your journey. Join us as we demystify big ideas about conscious consumerism and hear from amazing business owners using their work for positive change. Thanks for being here, and enjoy the show. Hey, Molly, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel.
Well, I am going to start with a page out of your own book. I know you asked this to all your guests. Can you give me the Molly 101?
Oh,
So, who are you? What are you passionate about? How and why did you get started doing what you're doing now?
awesome. Well, my name is Molly and I am a follower of Jesus. I'm a wife to John, a mom to Lily and Amos, and I am a content creator and writer. So I blog over at Still Being Molly, which has been my internet home for almost 14 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
And I also host a podcast called Business with Purpose that is almost 4 years old. And I have been also, I travel and I speak and teach. I teach workshops and I speak at small businesses and churches and conferences and all kinds of things. So I love what I get to do. I'm really passionate about just kind of sharing what Jesus has done in my life. But then one of the things that that has really kind of transformed over the past 8 to 10 years is my passion for fair trade and ethical fashion, and how I believe that as consumers, we have power in our purchasing. And I love to educate people on why shopping fair trade and shopping ethically is important. And yeah, so that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
Oh, I love it. That's so cool. So 14 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
What kind of led you to get started? And
Well, so I have a background in improv and sketch comedy.
oh, fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I did that for about 15 years, and my lifelong dream was to be on Saturday Night Live. And
Awesome.
that was like pretty much all I ever wanted to do. And I was an English major in college, and my concentration was in creative writing, obviously. And I started the blog in college because I really was looking for an outlet to kind of hone my comedy writing craft. And it originally started as a vision to become like the next The Onion,
Oh,
like like the satirical news website. Yeah.
wow. What an interesting
I
change.
know, I know. When people find that, they're like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Yeah, you should read my early writing. It's very embarrassing." Yeah, so I that was what I really wanted to do. I loved to write satire and parody, and so I just kind of used my blog as an outlet to kind of publish that work and kind of hone that craft, so to speak. And eventually, just as my life changed, I started to just kind of write about what was going on in my life. And about 2009, 2010 into 2011, that 2.5 year period, I a lot was going on in my life, and I'd had some big major life transitions, moving to a new state, getting out of a pretty bad relationship, and um but then getting into a new relationship, and coming to faith in Christ, and then also getting engaged and planning a wedding. Like, there was just a lot happening in that very kind of short amount of time, and I was writing about it. And I suddenly realized that there were people reading my blog that were not my dad and my sister. And I was like, "Oh, I think people actually like my writing, and I think people are connecting
Wow.
with this." And so it kind of grew from there. And then by 2012, late 2012 is when I realized, "Oh, I think I could maybe even monetize this. I think I could maybe do this for a living." And started to
What an amazing realization. That's so cool.
yeah, yeah,
What a fun turning point.
yeah. It was definitely not like a, you know, when I started that, I mean, monetizing it and doing the blog and all that for a living when I started was not even remotely on my radar. And so it just kind of was this organic transition, really. Um, and, but I mean, my content didn't really change. I just was a little bit more strategic and instead of it treating it like a hobby, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to try to treat this like a business and see what happens. And then by the end of 2013 into 2014 is when I was able to leave leave my day job and pursue the blog full time.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, I was going to ask you this later, but I feel like I'll ask just in case we miss anything. One of our company's values is iterate often. So basically, we just, as we're getting feedback from people and as we're realizing that we can do better and better, just making sure that we're making those pivots. But sometimes it leads to really funny changes, like for
Mhm.
instance, you going from, being a satire comedy to what you are now. Um, is there anything else that you think of when I say that that's been kind of like a big switch for you guys? That's obviously a great example.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've done a ton of switches over the years. I mean, well, when I went to college, my first major when I was a freshman was musical theater. So
Nice.
I thought that like
I actually didn't know we had this in common. I also majored in theater in college.
yeah, yeah, I started
So,
off as musical theater, but my faculty advisor for the theater department sat me down one day towards the end of my freshman year, and he had a conversation with me. And so he had found out that I was a part of a campus sketch comedy group. Now, the sketch comedy group that was on my campus was huge. I mean, we would and not like big as in numbers, but like it was really coveted. Like people, when we had our shows, we would sell out our shows on campus. Like everybody knew about
wow,
Seeing You Tonight. It was a big part of the campus. I don't even know if it's still
cool.
going, sadly, but when I was there, it was a really big deal. And that was actually part of the reason that I chose the school that I went to, because I knew that they had a really successful sketch comedy group. And
Yeah,
so I joined the sketch comedy group and I loved it. Like it was just the best thing. And my
so
faculty
fun.
advisor in the theater department sat me down and he was like, "You're going to have to choose either musical theater or the sketch group."
What?
And I said, "Well, why?" And he was like, "Well, everybody knows that comedy isn't real theater." And I
What?
was like, "Excuse me."
Oh, wow.
And he basically just started to like dog sketch comedy and how it was just an embarrassment to the craft of theater and like all this
Oh my
stuff. So I
gosh.
sat there and I looked at him and I was like, "We'll see ya." And then
Yeah,
I went to my I went to like the registrar the next day and switched my major. And I
that's amazing.
yeah, and so I switched to creative writing because I was like, well, the creative writing concentration had a lot of different types of writing classes that I thought would be good for kind of what I wanted to do. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Writing comedy.
yeah, and so
Cool.
kind of the rest is history. So, but when I look at that and how kind of where I started, and then when I graduated college, and during in college, in addition to doing comedy and improv and all these kinds of things, I was also really involved in student government. And so then I was like, okay, well then maybe do I have a career in politics? Like I don't know. It
Mhm.
just got so kind of
Yeah,
all over the place. I mean, I really feel like college is that time where you start to figure out what is it that you're good at, what do you like, what are you called to. And so my first job right out of college, like I graduated college on a Sunday, moved to Richmond, Virginia the next day, and I began working for Virginia Governor Tim Kaine at the time. And so I was like a governor's fellow for the summer. And then that fellowship ended. And you have to realize that this is 2007. So this is kind of right before the recession, but the
mm,
economy was not in good shape at the time. And so there was
mhm.
a lot of budget cuts left and right. And so I was having a hard time finding a job. And then I had met the superintendent of a public school system in Richmond. And he was like, "We are looking for English teachers. Do you want to be a high school teacher?" And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Sure.
Sure. So there I was at 22 years old, and I'm now teaching like sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school. And I was, barely out of high school myself. So it was just a very weird time, but I learned, I look back on that, and I learned so much during that time. And it's funny how all the skills that I've gained through, through improv and through sketch comedy, through even theater classes, through
Yeah.
working for the government, through being a high school teacher, all of those skills, I use those skills every single day. And I don't know that I would have gotten those skills had I not kind of had this very weird roundabout, career path in so many ways. And so, and then I could go down all the other like random jobs that I've had over the years, but I really think that for me, what I've found has been really valuable is just kind of walking through the next door that's open.
Absolutely.
And realizing that sometimes opportunities are placed in your path, and you might not know why that opportunity has been placed there, but it's been placed there for a reason. And so if, with discernment, with wisdom, and making sure that, it's a legit opportunity, I think you can really learn a lot by just kind of, like I said, walking through that door that's been opened.
Definitely. Wow, so cool. It's fun to hear kind of your meandering path to
Yeah,
where you are.
I know.
It actually has, like, a lot of overlaps with me, so
Oh,
that's fun
yeah,
fun for me too.
yeah.
Well, you now, since you started your blog and since it began to pivot in that direction, you've been part of this community for years now of ethical shopping and ethical purchasing and talking to some really cool business leaders and personal leaders. Who are some guests who really change your perspective? And then also, how have you seen this community grow and change?
Man, that is a tough question.
Yeah, it's big.
I'll answer the second question first, just how
Perfect.
I've seen the community grow and change.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're kind of referring to just like the ethical fashion, fair trade world in general.
Yeah.
And it's been so interesting because, when I started really learning more about it was really in mid 2011, after my first trip to Kenya. And after my first trip to Kenya, I was while I was there, I toured a fair trade factory in Nairobi, and that was such a eye-opening experience for me because I was able to see, oh, these are like fair trade is changing people's lives. The value of fair
Mm,
trade, the impact of fair trade is more than I think we can even really begin to understand. And it is
definitely.
so countercultural to the way that the majority of the business world runs. And it's so impactful on people's lives. And so when I came
Mm,
home, I just started to research as much as I could. And at the time, my entire impression was like, oh, well, fair trade is coffee, tea, and chocolate. I didn't realize that there was this whole other world of fair trade goods. And yes, they were around,
totally.
but they certainly were not as you could not find fair trade companies and ethical fashion companies as easily then that as you can now.
Totally.
And then in 2015, I started the ethical brand directory on my blog.
Mm,
And I started it because there was, I mean, to my knowledge at the time, there was nothing out there like it. In
wow.
2015, I was just like, I am searching for a list of companies that are ethical or fair trade or made in the USA or whatever, like companies that I can shop with, and have peace of mind.
Absolutely.
And I
And even if that did exist, I always tell, myself and then people working with me that even if it did exist, if we couldn't find it while we were earnestly looking for it,
right,
then there needs to be more, right?
right,
It needs to grow.
right. And so at the time there was not anything like it
Mhm.
and that I could find. And trust me, I had scoured the internet.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so I was just like, well, I'll start one. And so I created it was so janky. Like I literally just created a page on my blog and just went and found all the companies that I could find and put them in alphabetical order and put links to them, like and what category
Mhm.
they were in. And
I mean, that's great.
when started it, it was, mid 2015, and it had, I want to say the directory I had like maybe 35 or 40 businesses on it.
Mhm.
As of last count from my current version of the ethical brand directory, I have close to 420
Wow,
businesses on
awesome.
it.
That's
So,
great.
I mean, some of them had been around at the time, but I couldn't find them.
Yeah.
So one, visibility is big and that's changed a lot. But two, I mean, a lot of them in 4 or 5 years, a lot of those brands are new.
Yeah.
And so that's a big deal. And I've also been able to add some bigger brands to that list. I mean, or brands that maybe I didn't know at the time, like Patagonia is one.
Yeah.
Which, is obviously has been kind of at the forefront of the ethical fashion movement for a long time. And
Totally.
that's built into their values. But even
Yeah.
companies like New Balance manufactures a lot of their shoes in the United States. I mean, they're not 100% ethical, but they definitely have ethical options. So you have some of these companies that are really making big, big, big changes. And so I've seen a huge, huge shift in the past, 4 to 5 years especially. And I think
Oh, good.
we are going to continue to see that over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so encouraged because I feel the same way, but it's fun to hear it from other people's perspective. And I mean, you've been doing so many just in-depth interviews with these people over the years, so it's fun to hear you say that.
Yeah. And then as far
Absolutely.
as interviews that have really changed my perspective, man, I mean, I've interviewed actually just yesterday, I think episode 184 came out.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've interviewed like I think I've had maybe one repeat person.
Mm,
So all of, that's, 180 plus different people that I've
yeah.
interviewed. And it's really interesting because I mean, I interview so many different types of people, and there are certainly some conversations that really stand out in my mind as just like, man, that was so awesome. But in specifically in regards to ethical fashion, some of the ones that really, really stick out in my mind, way back towards the beginning of the show in like October of 2016. I think she was episode like 11 or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
but oh my goodness, hold on one second. I want to make sure that I say her name correctly. I'm sorry.
No, no worries. It's a good thing to do.
And I want to confirm for you. I'm assuming you can edit this, right?
Yeah, we definitely can.
um okay. Yes, okay. It was episode 6. Okay, I'm going to start that back over.
Great.
So, way back in October of 2016, it was episode 6, and her name is Suzette Munson, and she is the founder of Love 41, which is an ethical leather company. And they make, different leather goods, bags, wallets, all that kind of stuff. But her episode, she is just, well, one, she's hilarious. But just the way that she kind of talks about the way that they run their business. I remember that was very early on, one of the first episodes that I was like, I think we're on to something here. I really love her. And then, over the years, I mean, people like Liz Bohannon and from Seiko Designs and Jessica Honegger from Noonday Collection, Carly Burson from Tribe Alive, Barrett Ward from Able. I mean,
That's amazing.
these
Yeah.
are people who have just really done incredible work over the years. Katie Martinez from Elegant Teas, Matt Richardson from Causebox. I mean, I think these are people that are really kind of paving the way for others to kind of come behind them. And I saw this really cool graphic the other day that was kind of there was a picture of wolves, and the wolves were running through snow, like we're talking like 3-4 feet of snow, and the first wolf is like ahead of the pack, and I want you just to picture like this frozen tundra with just really thick snow, and it's just a sheet, like a just a really smooth blanket of snow, but there's this one wolf at the front that is kind of pushing its way through the snow and kind of paving a path, and
Mm,
kind of running in an S, and all the other wolves are running in a straight line behind that one wolf on an easier path through the snow, because the
mm,
first wolf really got the majority of the snow out of the way. And it's
yeah.
just like the perfect metaphor for leadership in business, and how really appreciating the people that have kind of come before you and paved that path to make the path a little bit easier. And if you're second in line, if you're third in line, if you're fourth in line, like you're still continuing to kind of knock that snow out of the
Oh,
way for the people
absolutely.
behind you. But just realizing that it's all like we're all in it together.
Totally.
Yeah. So those are definitely some of the ones that stick out in my mind.
Mm. And I mean, how much more important is that in an impact business, right?
Oh, for
Because
sure.
that applies everywhere. But another one of our company values that I was going to ask you about, this feels like a great time, is we say ease without apathy.
Mm,
So making sure that we're making it easy for our customers to find these companies and to connect with them, and most importantly to purchase from them. Um, but with that ease and that convenience, not taking away the amazing connection that they can have with them, the learning that they can be doing, making sure that they're not apathetic to the impact that needs to be made and that they are making. Um, and I just feel like I love that picture. I love that you even said, picture it. I closed my eyes and was thinking about it,
yeah.
because the first business owner to do it helps, push it forward for the rest of us who are starting businesses behind them. But then, once 100 wolves have gone, then the millions of consumer wolves like can come behind. I don't know. It's an amazing whole ecosystem, and you're so right. Um, yeah, and I'm so thankful for so many of those guests that you mentioned, and just the work that they've done to, like you said, create the visibility and the awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. I'm always so hopeful doing podcast interviews. It makes me re-energized
Yes,
hearing
me
these
too.
stories.
Me too.
So you share ethical products and the people who are making it happen with the world all the time through your blog and through your podcast. But how has this changed the way that you live your personal life? I mean, as far as your own ethical fashion, and what tips do you have for listeners who might just be starting this ethical journey?
Yeah, it's been such a process for me over the past 8 to 10 years, and really a journey. And I always tell people, like, if you're just
Totally.
starting out, don't think that you have to completely overhaul the way that you shop or the way that you buy things overnight. It's really a transition, and little by little it does add up. And so I always tell people, like, start with one thing, one category.
Hi.
So maybe it's shoes. Just shop ethically with shoes.
Yeah,
That's just a really it's a really easy category to kind of change the way you shop in. Or you can, jewelry. Maybe you're a jewelry person. There are so many ethical jewelry brands that
absolutely.
are fantastic.
Flooded. Amazing impact going on with
Yeah,
jewelry.
exactly. So, you could change out jewelry. So it doesn't have to be this complete overhaul overnight. And even me, like, I don't get this perfect all the time. I still shop at Target. I love Target. But I don't go and buy a ton of clothes at Target anymore. I don't, buy jewelry at Target anymore. I'm just much more mindful with my purchases. And
Yeah.
it's it's been, like I said, it's been a transition. And um I mean, now I would say I purchase about 80 to 85% of everything we buy is ethical. And if I can't find an ethical option, then usually what I do is I try to look for it secondhand. And if I
Yeah,
can't find it secondhand, then kind of my last resort is buying it. I try to maybe then buy it from a small business or buy it locally. And then,
totally.
from there, sometimes, convenience just is what you have to do. I mean, and I still use Amazon Prime. Like, I got kids, and Amazon Prime
Totally.
subscribe and save is my jam. So, for school snacks and stuff like that. So,
For sure.
I always just tell people it's progress, not perfection. It's not something that you have to really just change completely overnight, and giving yourself some grace, like making wise decisions. But I will say, like, I'm just not an impulse purchaser anymore. I really am very thoughtful about buying things, even when it's ethical. Like, I really marinate on purchasing decisions before I go and spend money. And so I think that's been a big impact for me.
Absolutely.
And
And even that is more ethical, right? Because if you're choosing not to just buy things needlessly that
yeah,
are then, and especially on an environmental
right.
level, then that allows for them to be, taken out of the waste stream, but also like less resources are being put into making that
Yep.
thing. So I think all of that's very
Yeah,
important.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I I totally echo what you said. I feel like we love to say progress over perfection, and just reminding people that those things are going to start to happen naturally when you take those small steps.
Mhm.
Like if you are starting to think about your jewelry, then your mind is like literally going to change in small and then big ways to say, oh, wait, I did find this company with jewelry. And then as you're looking for jewelry, you might discover that new shoe company. And then turns out they're exactly what you're looking for and you're excited about them. It doesn't have to be this like drudgery, like working your way through it. It ends up being a really kind of joyful and transformative process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I could not agree more.
Okay, well, my last question for you is one that I love being asked, but it's a little bit tough. If you could have the whole world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you say?
Oh man. If I could have the whole world's attention for 30 seconds, what would I say? I would say, I don't know if this is the exact wording that I would say it. Hopefully, do I have, okay, qualifying question. Do I
Yeah,
get to
great.
like,
I did the
am I
same
going to
thing.
know in advance that I have this 30 seconds?
Ooh. Mm.
Or is it like,
When I was asked the question, I imagined that like, yes, there's like an event coming up and I like know that I'll be able to speak to the whole world. But I guess that definitely changes it because if you just were put on the spot for 30 seconds, which I guess is what's happening
yeah.
right now, then it might be
Yeah.
different.
Well, I
But
mean, the content would the message would be the same. I think it's just the way I
mhm,
would word it,
yeah,
depending on how much time I had planned.
cool. Well, what's the content?
But I think it would be something around along the lines of just how Jesus changed my life, and if he
Mhm,
can change my life, he can change your life. And it's the most important thing in the world to me because for 25 years I lived life for myself, and at the age of 25 everything changed. And I'm a completely different person than I was 10 years ago, and I can't attribute anything that has changed in my life in the last 10 years to anything other than Christ. And so it's just the most important thing to me, and so I would wanna share that with the world. So that would be it.
yeah, it's cool to hear that your perspective on that and how that's shaped what you're doing now.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. Well, is there anything else that I missed that you're dying to say or tell our listeners about what you're up to? Anything like that?
Well, no, I think, just definitely, I love to keep in touch with people. So you can find me. My website is stillbeingmolly.com, and I'm on social media at stillbeingmolly. And my podcast is Business with Purpose. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook with that, or excuse me, Instagram and Facebook with that. And I'm at Business with Purpose Podcast. And you can find it on any podcast listening platform. So come say hi. I love to make new friends.
Amazing. Yeah, guys, go listen to the podcast. She's like she said, she has 184 episodes. They're incredible. Actually, on my walk and run this morning, I listened to her episode with the Fair Trade Federation, and it was
Awesome.
amazing. So,
Yes.
yeah, you are fantastic,
Aw.
Molly. Thank you so much for being with me
This was
today.
so much fun. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you like this episode, you can support us by leaving a great review, sharing with your friends, and subscribing. Thanks for caring about our planet and the people on it. We'll see you again soon.